Recovering from miscarriage can be isolating. If you're looking for support, you may not know where to find it. Today, we're talking to the founder of the Early Pregnancy Loss Association, a different kind of help after miscarriage. It's got the typical and important education piece and emotional wellness resources. But in addition, their practical miscarriage care kits and medical bill assistance program provides the kind of support that you may not know just how much you need. Welcome to Baby or Bust Fertility Podcast, the podcast for anyone curious about infertility and miscarriage and early pregnancy support. I'm your host, Dr. Lora, Shahine, a double board-certified OBGYN and reproductive endocrinologist and former fertility and IVF patient myself, helping people build families for almost 20 years. And dedicated to supporting and educating you on your family building journey. If you've listened to any other episodes of the Baby or Bust Fertility Podcast or seen any of the content I've shared across multiple media platforms, you know I am all about shattering shame and stigma around miscarriage and infertility. Miscarriage especially leaves people feeling broken. Hence the name of my book on miscarriage, Not Broken. And many support resources help with emotional healing that's very needed along the journey. I recently discovered a different kind of miscarriage support organization, and today we are going to learn more about it. The Early Pregnancy Loss Association. I am so excited to share their mission and goals. This group is out of Michigan, and they do all the important parts of supporting someone through miscarriage: education, providing resources, emotional support. But there's two unique parts to their program that I am thrilled to talk to the founder about today. Number one, miscarriage care kits, which are much more than just self-care kits. And number two, a really unique financial support for miscarriage medical bills. Emily Carrington is here with us today. She suffered 2 miscarriages in 2014 and dealt with the physical, emotional healing, and paid the medical bills for her losses with payment plans for over 2 years. She said to herself, "We can do something better." Emily, it is such an honor. Welcome to Baby or Bust.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really thrilled to have you here. Will you share a little bit about your story and, how the Early Pregnancy Loss Association came to be?
Yeah. So in 2014, we were pregnant with our first baby, and we were very excited. Everything was sort of working out the way we thought it would. It seemed like it was going according to plan. And we had an ultrasound at around 6 or 7 weeks, and we had seen a heartbeat. And then it was nearly 12 weeks. We had not told anyone but close family that we were pregnant. And we were getting ready to tell everyone. We're sitting in the waiting room talking about our plan to announce. And that's when we discovered at that appointment that there was no heartbeat. And so after 3 different scans and ways to look for the heartbeat, it was determined that I had had a missed miscarriage. And at the time, I didn't even know what that word meant. I knew miscarriage was possible. I was familiar with that, but I didn't know what a missed miscarriage was. So it felt like all of a sudden I was flooded with grief and information and making all of these decisions about, do I get a DNC? Do I wait to miscarry at home? And my doctor understood and gave us a lot of time and space and said, come back if you need time to ask more questions. But I didn't even know what my questions were.
Yeah.
So that was our first loss. And we ended up having a DNC. And, part of that story was showing up at the surgical unit with a $500 check in hand just to get in that day. That doesn't count all of the other costs for anesthesiologist and surgeon. So, and it was a weird day. We were at just a freestanding surgical unit for the medical center. And so there were people having, all sorts of benign surgeries as well.
Yeah.
So that was our first loss. And
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was really disorienting and a lot of information. We actually moved shortly after that loss across the country for my husband's job. And I had thought, as we had planned everything out, that actually at that time I would stay home. We were pregnant. It was all just working out great.
Mm.
So we moved to Michigan and did some consulting, did some research. We had no cause for our miscarriage, and we got pregnant again that summer, a few months later, and pretty much the same story. We had not seen a heartbeat at 8 weeks, but we had not had an 8-week appointment. We didn't have an appointment till 12.
Mm-hmm.
And same story. They couldn't find a heartbeat.
Mm.
Sent me in for an ultrasound. This time it was more drawn out. Instead of having in-house ultrasounds, I had to schedule at the hospital every time.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was excruciating waiting and scheduling. And that time I decided to miscarry at home.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after that miscarriage, sort of at that point that year become defined by miscarriage. And it was actually after that one that we'd been paying bills all summer. I got like a $90 bill. I had miscarried at home. I didn't even have surgery, but I had had multiple doctor's appointments, multiple ultrasounds.
Mm.
And I got like a 90-some dollar bill. And that was sort of, when I look back, the beginning of all of this. And I said to my husband, like, if I could pay these for women, I just would. Like, it's not even the money. It's just the writing the check. Like, I don't want to write another check. And we were blessed that it wasn't for us at that time the financial burden.
Mm-hmm.
We know that it absolutely can be. And we have later experienced some medical financial burdens in some serious ways. And we were lucky. I've talked to women since that, have had thousands or $10,000 of miscarriage expenses. So that was sort of the beginning. I mean, there was a lot more that happened and went into it. I did not set out to like start a nonprofit. That was not my original plan, especially my background is in museum studies and nonprofits. And maybe this is how I got here. I did not have a medical or a science background. So I was feeling deeply sort of the confusion and lack of understanding of what was happening.
Yeah. It's such a different kind of feeling. It's like, if you break your arm in a skiing accident, of course there's going to be medical bills and, x-rays and visits and you're healing from something that happened. But there's just something that is just so emotionally trying to have to get that reminder, even in the mail of this medical bills and having to pay for something that you really never wanted. And it's such a natural thing just in our society, even though miscarriage is absolutely no one's fault.
Right.
It's no one's fault. But we can carry that burden and feel a sense of responsibility for it. And it's just this this dig. It's salt in the wound. It's just, it's paying for grief, and it just keeps coming up. And I've never heard anybody talk about supporting people through the financial piece of miscarriage. And I just love that you had that vision of, if I could pay for this for someone else, I want to do that. It's such a beautiful mission, and how did the organization come together?
Yeah, so we grew out of that idea, but it took us 8 years to pay a bill. It did not take us 8 years to get off the ground, but it took us 8 years to pay a bill. So that's
you're tenacious, though. You have a goal and you made it happen.
Yeah, exactly. That's the end of the story, or at least I hope the beginning of a new part of the story. So, like I said, I didn't set out to start a nonprofit. And when I told my husband, like, I wish I could just pay these if I had all the money in the world. And he reminded me very quickly that we don't have all the money in the world. And so we sort of like tucked it away. But just as we continued to sort of dwell on it, I wanted to make a donation in honor of our little ones. And it was around Christmas time. And I couldn't find an organization that really fit what I was looking for. And things have really changed in the last 10 years that way. But there just wasn't much out there. I even asked like a bereavement coordinator, like, is there an organization who can I donate money to? And they're like in honor or sponsor. And there just wasn't a lot. And I know now that there were some organizations working very hard.
Mm-hmm.
But most of those organizations were focused on miscarriage through stillbirth and infant death.
Mm-hmm.
And often miscarriage was sort of a like tag along, which they were doing amazing work and leading the way, but there wasn't that focus on miscarriage loss.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of when we started to see that, and that just became more and more clear. And finding women who have experienced miscarriage is difficult. It doesn't happen in the labor and delivery unit most of the time. We focus on pre-20-week loss. And some second trimester losses, or most do, but most miscarriages are in that first trimester. So they may not have established care with their doctor.
Yep.
They may be in the ER. They may be at home. So they're kind of all over the place. So that was sort of the beginning. And then I started talking to other women, and I was talking to my mom and my sister, who were big at sort of leading the way of making this come together. And so we just got women together and had some like focus groups of like, what was your experience? And everyone sort of had the same story. I felt lost. I felt undereducated. I felt unprepared. And we all started saying the same things, even though we had miscarriages all over the country. And so we sort of realized at that point there was definitely work to be done, and that it was definitely worth focusing on these pre-20-week losses, finding these women, giving these resources, working with doctors and nurses. So it was at that time we set a vision that no one suffers miscarriage alone. That was when we set out our mission. We want to provide education. We want to provide resources, including financial resources, and we want to raise awareness.
Yeah.
And so that is where we started. And in 2016, we incorporated with our first board. So it was just talking to women. Our whole board are mothers. We're not medical professionals. I often say like we're parent advocates. We work very closely with many wonderful doctors and nurses. They've helped us develop our educational information. And we really started with that educational information.
That's great.
And that education piece.
Yeah, this is not something that we are taught in middle school health class and high school health class. And, something that has really been absolutely lost in the last few generations is just the village mentality of helping people with family and talking. And I think honestly, if you really look at it, it's when birthing and female care was really taken away from women and like sort of placed in this like Western medicine, like the doctor knows everything, and sort of extricating, women, midwives, the village helping each other. And it's almost like you're filling this void that the last few generations, it's like you're talking about, you're building this village. You've got these women, you're talking to your mom, you're sharing experiences, you're hearing from women all over the country that they all felt the same way, underprepared, undereducated. And I love that you're doing that. The two things that make you so different are the miscarriage packages and the billing. Tell me about the miscarriage care kits, because what I'll tell you is what I was expecting, when I looked online, is I was expecting to see like a candle, some soft socks, some tea, and, like a teddy bear. And you have very comforting self-care things there, but you have got some real like necessary things that people need. And I just was like mind blown. So tell us what is in your prepare kit for a miscarriage.
Again, this all started with just realizing what people needed and pushing into that. And actually the first kit was made for a friend and wasn't really even a work of the organization. It was just one of those, we need to take care of women. And another friend and I came together and sort of did the first accidental prototype. And then it was like, no, this is something we have to do. So those kids are really focused on that home miscarriage experience. And with my own story, just how utterly underprepared I was, even though it was my second miscarriage. So the sanitary items are first and foremost. And we really think that giving dignity, in some ways, these kids they're so nitty gritty, but we think that gives dignity to women because at the end of the day, we really don't believe that bleeding alone into your towel is dignifying. And we also think they help educate and prepare women. So we have sanitary pads, large sanitary pads, and honestly, probably not enough, but enough to get you, through the night. We have bed pads and we put a couple of those in that can be used in any sort of way because just the reality is one thing that has really frustrated me was that with my first loss, I was told, oh, it'll be like a heavy period. And a miscarrying at 11 weeks was more like delivering my oldest at 40 weeks than it was like any period I've ever had. So obviously there was differences, the pushing, the crowning, all of that wasn't as bad, but the actual, there were contractions. I wasn't expecting the contractions.
Yeah. I mean, the cervix has to open, right? But most people who are trying to counsel somebody about what to expect at their miscarriage haven't actually experienced a miscarriage.
Right.
And so they're just sort of taught in their medical training, like, oh, it's like a heavy period because you don't know. So I even think just like getting that kit, although it might be like, oh my gosh, do I need sanitary pads that are this big? And you might not, it might not be that like that. But if it is, you're like, oh, like someone else has experienced this much bleeding before.
Right.
I received this kit that has a pamphlet and it tells me, what to expect and do. And then I was just blown away by the little hat that you can put in the toilet.
Yes.
Like, oh my gosh. Like, I know for anybody who's listening that hasn't had a miscarriage, you might be like, what are you talking about? But we do tell patients like, hey, you can collect the tissue at home if you want, because we can send it in to do, chromosomal screening because that's the most common cause of miscarriage. And I never thought about getting one of those. It's like a plastic bucket. If you do have a live birth, people will use that afterwards in the delivery or recovery, or if people are trying to monitor their urine output. And so it's like, it literally is this like plastic bucket that kind of slips underneath the lid of the toilet and you can capture things. And, this is just for anyone who's listening and might be like, oh my gosh, what are these women talking about? This is, you deal in this, because this happens to women every day around the country. And I'm so thankful for you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. The urine hat is, and again, these were just unfortunately from experiences, but like it solves so many problems and it's so easy and so like cheap. It does not cut it's just such a solution.
Yeah.
So many women have expressed like, I flushed after my miscarriage. I didn't even know I could collect remains. And now I feel guilty forever. Or we were trying to collect remains for the sake of testing because it was our second. And I had a generous doctor who was willing to move forward with testing. And like, there was no good way to, I'm like, sorry if you all are listening, if you haven't done it, but like I'm bleeding everywhere, right? Like trying to find these things. And then my doctor and my husband are on the phone, like, how much blood has she lost? And how do you quantify that? When it's into the toilet or on a towel or into the shower? And so we actually connected with an organization called Heaven's Gain. We were just starting to get the miscarriage care kits off the ground, the really early version. And we had gone to a conference and Heaven's Gain happened to be right next to us in the display. And they had these body retrieval kits. We knew right away, like, we need these. We have to have these. They come with a strainer. They come with a receptacle. I put my baby in a Tupperware container and a lunchbox into the freezer. They come with instructions for a saline preservation, so you don't have to put your baby on the ice cream. Gives so much dignity to the experience, not to the experience, but to the baby and the mother. And that is just really important to us, that we just feel that women have been neglected in a serious way. So yeah, we're just trying to use those kits, and they have the education materials and they have some comfort items, mostly consumable. And so we're just trying to help women feel loved, have what they need, and to have the resources, and we also have the small kits to provide women if they're not miscarrying at home, which still have the education. So it's, again, everything is for our vision that no woman suffers this alone
Oh,
and that they have what they need.
we are going to get back to the show in just a second, but I'd love to take a moment to let you know just how important reviewing the show is. Take a moment to give us a 5-star review if you feel like it. Leave a comment. It's so important. I have one of the most recent ones from Lora Ann. Dr. Shahine gives great information on all things fertility. Think of her as your REI bestie. I love that. Honest and insightful conversations. Lora Ann, thank you so much for this wonderful review. It means so much to the show. Now let's get back to talking to Emily. Tell me more about the other unique piece of your organization, the kind of helping with medical bills. I mean, it's so important to shed light on that. And tell me a little bit about how that works.
So that, like we said, that was the beginning, the first sort of spark when we look back. And that has been such a long road, both to raise the money, but to also work out a way. One thing that was really, really, really important to us was that women would not have to fill out a long, arduous application.
Yeah.
My original vision was that they would just disappear into thin air. That's not really doable.
Yeah, but help.
So what happens now, we currently only have this program with our local hospital. We are piloting it with Hillsdale Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And any woman who carries anywhere in the system, so not just at the ER, but also with an affiliated OB, any bill she has associated with her miscarriage, anything, if it's an ultrasound, if it's, fluids because of
blood work or visit. Yeah, there's so many things.
Any sort of care or follow-up care, she is eligible for up to $500 in assistance after out-of-pocket expenses. She receives a note in the small miscarriage care kit that I talked a little bit about. Those just have some pads and some comfort items and education. And there's a note that this resource is available and to call this phone number. And when she gets her bill, she calls the phone number and they take $500 off her bill.
That's amazing. And thanks for clarifying that it's just in Michigan and this hospital system, because, I do think people are going to be listening to this from around the United States and the world and be like, oh my gosh, I want to do this. And so even if we can't help every person that's listening right now, just the fact that we're getting this idea out there, that this could be a way to help someone. I love that.
And I think we love people to copy any of our services. And our miscarriage care kits, I do want to make sure is clear. They are available anywhere in the United States. If you contact us, we will ship them to you overnight. We will help anyone in the United States with our miscarriage care kits. And we really hope that this program with Hillsdale Hospital is a pilot for something bigger and for growth. And so we don't see this as the end. We see this as the beginning. We had to start with some contained.
Yeah.
But we're really hoping that it either is the prototype for us to expand or gives other interested parties a path forward, because it took us about 8 years to navigate hospital and IRS, and all of that took a very long time. So we're hoping that we sort of started to clear that path.
Absolutely.
And that other people can join us.
Yeah. Do you have any idea how many women you've helped so far? Just if you added up the care kits or the focus groups and the bill pay. Yeah. Have you ever thought about that?
We haven't thought about the whole number. We have care kits just continue to grow. And we do think about that number a lot. But I say that, and I don't know that I've added all the numbers together. We have certainly distributed more than 3,000 care kits in the last 5 years.
That's amazing, Emily.
It just keeps growing. Most of those are actually our small care kit. But last year, the large care kits that we've been talking about more really started to click with people. and the need for them is starting to click.
Yeah.
And they're starting to click with hospitals and doctors' offices. So last year that really picked up. And this year alone, we've already distributed, 60 small kits around the country, and another 15 to 20 large kits. And we just anticipate probably to be on path. Right now, we're distributing approximately 1,000 kits per year.
Amazing. And is it something that the patient has to reach out directly, or could it be a friend that reaches out for someone that they love?
We want to get these in the right people's hands at the right time,
Mm-hmm.
however. So we distribute directly to hospitals, doctors, and nurses, and the request is all the same, and they are all free. So we try to distribute them through anyone who will give them to a friend. So we have an online request form that if a woman needs a kit, she can fill out the information. And if a friend or sister or mother or husband know of someone they need a kit, we just need the name and address, and we don't ask any questions. We overnight it, and it gets there.
Emily, that's beautiful.
So anyone, anywhere, we want doctors, nurses, pastors, friends, sisters, brothers, get them in the women's hands. That's our goal.
Amazing. Well, so this is a great opportunity. I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing. And please tell us how we can find Early Pregnancy Loss Association, how we can order kits, how we can donate. Like, let's help what you're doing. So how do we find you?
Well, visit us at miscarriage-care.com, and all of that is on there. Our care kit request, our donate tab, as well as our blog and other information. We also have a Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So if you find us Early Pregnancy Loss Association or Miscarriage Care,
Great.
You can find us anyway that way. We are online, and there's ways to communicate with us, contact us, request kits, donate. And we love to hear from people and work with people. We're all in this together. So there's many ways to reach out. You can also send us private Facebook messages if you need to request a kit. We respond that way as well.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I would love for, your organization to connect with Parent Support of Puget Sound, which is an amazing resource in Washington State and around Seattle, which is where I am, because they also are doing this incredible support for people with miscarriage, stillbirth, infant loss. But I feel like you couldn't find your support, your village when you needed it. So you're creating it in Michigan. Let's connect with the Puget Sound, and let's connect, with all these wonderful groups, because there is such an incredible need, and just, you're such an inspiration. I mean, to take your own experience, a lot of people just take what happens. And then I know that you've gone on to have your family, which is so beautiful. And sometimes people just want to shut the door. They're just like, okay, that was a really crappy experience, and now I'm going to focus on my family and move forward and just try to put that in a little box and put it on the shelf. And that's okay. That's beautiful. But to find someone that is taking that experience and turning it into something beautiful to help other people is just such an inspiration, such a joy. And I really appreciate your being here today, Emily.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And we've just been, once we set out on the path, we continue to find that village. And it's just been such an amazing, supportive group of people ready to love women. So we appreciate it.
I love that. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Emily and learning more about her organization, the Early Pregnancy Loss Association. I love what they're doing to highlight the difficulties of paying medical bills for miscarriage. And I know what they're doing right now is helping kind of only in Michigan, but I think it's an incredible model to spread out through the United States. I hope that we can spread the word on this. And then these really practical and helpful miscarriage care kits that you can reach out to and have it overnighted. So if you have a friend, if you yourself or loved one has been diagnosed with a miscarriage, and you are trying to think about what to do to help and support them, this is something that you could do. So check out this incredible organization. Find this episode and all others on my website, drlorashahine.com. We are now on YouTube as well, so you can find me on my YouTube channel, Lora Shahine. You can find me on Instagram, on TikTok. I just love educating. Please Send us an email to hello@drlorashahine.com. Let us know topics you want us to cover, people you'd like us to interview. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you to our friends at Seattle Sperm Bank and Braze Runs Production for sponsoring the show. Thank you to my producer, Shannon Perry, and her team at Audiotocracy. This is your host, Dr. Lora Shahine. See you next week. And until then, wishing you love, luck, and pineapples.